do you get the best abs quickly?
Don't you want to look good naked?
When we're talking about getting a six-pack or training your abs, there is going to be a few things that you definitely want to focus on and make sure that you're doing properly in the gym, but also understanding that in order to see your abs or see your six-pack, it's definitely going to be also what you're paying attention to in the kitchen. So I think abs are built in the gym and then revealed in the kitchen is a really good way to think about it. So let's go over a few common mistakes and tips that we can chat about in terms of ab training and what you want to focus on and maybe not focus on. The first thing to think about when you're training your abs is to really focus on control over momentum. So when we're training that rectus abdominis or that six-pack muscle or any other muscles of your core, really focus on training it just as any other muscle, creating as much tension there as possible and eliminating momentum as much as you can. So for example, if you're doing a cable crunch, that's a common crunch movement, really focusing on creating a lot of tension within that spinal flexion movement and not just like pulling the weight down as much as you can or adding a ton of weight where you're letting other muscles take over, right? We really want to focus on what is the muscle tissue that we're trying to train and how can we create enough tension there and enough time under tension to create that stimulus. Next, we want to think about flexing at the spine and not the hips. So again, if we're training our core muscles, we want to figure out how to bring our sternum towards our pelvis or our pelvis towards our sternum. That's going to be shortening and contracting that rectus abdominis muscle. So think about bringing your rib cage down towards your hips versus just moving your entire body. That's gonna help you to really focus in on that rectus abdominis muscle. Some people notice that their hip flexors may take over when they're training their core. So if you're doing crunches or reverse crunches and you notice that maybe your hip flexors are the ones that are feeling the most tension and not necessarily your core or your rectus abdominis, then you wanna make sure that you are doing stuff to put the focus more so on that rectus abdominis. So a simple tip is to actually perform the movements with bent knees versus straight legs. That's gonna help to kind of take your hip flexors out of it a little bit and really focus in on that rectus abdominis muscle. Something to also think about is that if you are doing hundreds of crunches on the floor or hundreds of sit-ups or whatever you're doing, think about how you can make those a little bit harder by adding some weight or some load. So we talked about tips and common mistakes that people make when it comes to training their core or their abs. But I often get asked, how often should I be training my abs? How many times a week? How many exercises should I be doing? And again, it really comes back to treating your core, your ab muscles like any other muscle. You don't want to overdo it, but you want to do enough to create that stimulus that your body needs to adapt to in order to grow. So I like to incorporate different, movements depending on, what I'm focused on. But really, if I'm focused on training that rectus abdominis muscle, which is that six-pack muscle, that is going to come from those crunches and reverse crunches. So I like to incorporate maybe one crunch variation and one reverse crunch variation, anywhere between like 3 to 4 sets of maybe 10 to 12 reps within that, and then look to progress that over time with whatever movement I chose. If you're looking to train your core and build your abs, again, treat it as any other muscle. Focus on building your abs in the gym, and then in the kitchen is where they'll be revealed.